Good morning, everyone. I welcome you to the Thursday, February 6th, 2025 Tumwater City Public Works Committee meeting. And with us today, we have Councilmember Jefferson and myself, Councilmember Swarthout, and Councilmember Althauser is excused today. So the first order of business is approval of the minutes for the Public Works Committee meeting on January 9th, 2025. Do we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
A second? I'll second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, so now we'll just jump right into it with our first item on the agenda is the cost of service utility rate model report. And good morning, Patrick.
Good morning. So I'm Patrick Soderberg, the Water and Resource and Sustainability Program Manager. And this is one of the first big projects that I got to work on since I've been here. So a little over a year ago, we started this project. This is a project that we've been working with Carollo Engineers with to develop a utility rate model for our drinking water program. This model will allow us to evaluate our current cost of service as well as future cost projections and help us evaluate different rate designs for different customers and types of usage. Today we have Isla Barnes from Carollo Engineers who can do a much better job explaining this project than I can. So I'm going to hand it over to Isla.
Okay.
Were you ready, Isla?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I'm having a little bit of internet trouble, it appears, but we are going to move forward, and hopefully things stay with me. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, can everyone see my screen okay? Perfect, thank you so much. Thank you, Patrick. Again, my name is Isla Barnes. I am with Carollo Engineers. I have been doing rate studies for the last 16 plus years. I've been here with Carollo for the last 3 years. As Patrick mentioned, I've been working with Tumwater for about a little over a year. And today we're going to go over really what the project objectives were for this rate study, walk through the assumptions so you know what went into the rate study, go through the revenue requirements, and then talk about affordability of the rates that were already approved, go over the impact fees that we reviewed, and then look at the utilities path forward. So for our project objectives, we looked at a few things. First is the revenue requirement analysis. And what this does is this looks at the sufficiency of the utilities' existing rates to see if it can cover operating expenses, capital expenses, any planned improvements, things of that nature. We also took a look at affordability. So we looked at a couple of different factors that we'll go into. People are most familiar with looking at median household income, but we also looked at a couple of other benchmarks that are coming about in the water industry to gauge affordability. We also calculated impact fees. So we took a look at the existing impact fees and then looked at all of the planned improvements that are happening to see if those existing impact fees are sufficient. And then lastly, what we've done throughout the study is we've developed a rate model that we will turn over to the city. And then this will allow staff to do scenario planning in the future. So with our rate studies, we really go by American Water Works Association, or AWWA's M1 manual. This is like our Bible of rate making. And so this study and this analysis that we did is consistent with the methodologies published in this M1 manual. And we're also at Carollo, we are heavily involved in AWWA's Rates and Charges Committee. Some of us have actually Jennifer Ivy, who was the technical advisor on this project. She has co-authored some chapters in this manual. So we are definitely abreast on all things rates and charges. So what we've done in developing this financial planning analysis and developing this model is we incorporated budget documents, any pertinent financial information, financial policies, the CFP or the capital program, and we've put those items into the model. And then we've developed some different financial projections. Then we've gone back, like it's a lot of like iterative back and forth scenario planning. Okay, what if the capital spend is this? Then what does that do to the amount of revenue we need to collect? And so we've done that. And again, that model will be in the hands of staff once the study's complete. And they've looked at it plenty of times before today. So in talking about our financial plan assumptions, what was put into this model and this analysis? When we were looking at the financial requirements or the revenue requirements, we made sure that the operating reserve or the cash on hand was at least 20% of O&M expenses and annual debt service. So that just means we didn't let the cash balance go all the way to zero. So you have to have at least that much money that you're holding on to. We incorporated an annual growth rate of 1%. We escalated the O&M by 3.5%. That baseline O&M was fiscal year 2025. The CFP, or the capital project, that was escalated by 3% a year. If we in our modeling said, hey, you probably need to issue debt in these years, we required, or we had it set at a debt service reserve of 1 year payment. So that just means that if we issue debt in the model, it also said, hey, you have to have 1 year payment on hand that you can't spend. We also have a debt service coverage requirement of 1.25. And what that is every year, if you take your revenue for that year minus your operating expenses, it needs to be 1.2 times that of your annual debt payment. So with a debt service coverage requirement, you are not taking into account any cash you have on hand at the beginning of the year. This is just simply looking at annual revenue over expenses. So that's what went into the financial planning. Also, the capital projects that we use, this is the total capital spend for 11 years, so 2024 through 2035. And we've listed here some of the bigger projects. So we have the water rights acquisition, brewery well field, the water main replacement and extension program, some well improvements for well 15. And then, as you can see here, some others. I think the really big one is the Southeast Reservoir and System Extension of almost $25 million. So we have a total capital projects of about a little under $80 million. And that is over an 11-year period. So here like I said, we looked at a number of different scenarios. And what we've done is in fiscal year or calendar year, I should say, 2025 and 2026, you've already approved rate increases. So we have not, so we assumed, okay, there's not anything on top of that. So then starting in 2027, what do we need? What kind of increases do we need? So this is just one of many scenarios you could do. So I'm not suggesting you increase your rates by 31%. But given all of the capital that needs to happen and your operating expenses, this something like this would need to happen if you spent the amount of money on capital and operating that we have in our model. And so we have a 31.2% increase. And then after that, and that's a substantial increase. And then after that, it's 5% thereafter, which are more in line with inflationary type of increases. So what you're looking at
I have a
here.
question. I have
Oh,
a
sure.
question.
Absolutely.
Yes. So why the substantial increase in 2027?
Well, there is so a couple of things. So one, there's about, I think in 2027, and if Dan's on the line, he can help me out. I think there's about I think $10 million that year in capital spend. On
Mhm.
top of that, you can see so the blue bars are your operating expenses.
Mhm.
Okay. And then you have the orange bars that are that rate funded capital.
Okay.
And you see in 2025 and 2026, or I'm sorry, let me back up just a second. So the lines that are going across there, the dashed line are total revenues before a rate increase.
Mhm.
And then the green line is total revenue after the increase. So you see how the lines in 2025 and 26 and 27 are all below, or the bars are above the revenue. So meaning you are spending more than you're bringing in. However, you have cash on hand right now. So we're saying, okay, well, we're not going to have an increase. We're going to mitigate increases with the cash on hand that we have. And so we do that for a few years until it's not enough anymore. And so that's really the big thing, is that you're spending more than you're bringing in. But then what happens with an increase like 31%, of course, is that shoots up. You can see the black dotted line versus the green line.
Yeah.
In 2027, that comes up. And then what happens is then we've smoothed out increases. So then in some years, you'll see like 28 through 2030, you're actually bringing in more revenue now than you have expenses. But so you're building your cash back up. Then what happens in 2031, you have more expenses in this year than you do revenue, but you've built up cash for something like this. So instead of having zeros in 28 through 2030, and then you have to have another big spike in your increase, it's saying, okay, or what we would recommend is some type of smoothed out type of increase so that you're not having big jumps. And then, so then here you're bringing in less than you're spending, but you have enough cash on hand to handle that capital. And then same thing here, and then you get to 2034 and you're about even, like you're bringing in what you're spending. Another thing I should note is that there are some assumptions of debt issuances, as you can see with this gray bar that starts happening in 2028. It's like, okay, we're issuing a little bit of debt. So now you have a little bit of debt payment here as well. So
Yeah,
that's
just want to jump in, Isla. One of
Sure.
the things that I want to just kind of, also highlight is that, these models are, kind of fluid. And, one of the things I really appreciate Isla and her team over the last, I think it was like actually probably two-ish years, we've been working with them as we were going through the last budget update, which, when we originally started this project with Carollo, our budget was in a different format, and then as we got, halfway through, at least, maybe 20, 30% through the initial assumptions that went in, we changed that format on them. And, and so they've really been responsive to a lot of the things we've asked. One of the initial runs of the analysis suggested that the 2025 rate increase, was close to double digits as well. I don't think it was 31%, but it was certainly higher than 10 to 12%, or certainly higher than the 6% that we did employ. Also, as these are fluid, these are kind of decision-making tools for us. In 2026, we actually do have a rate increase that we're going to be looking at. And so, these numbers will change, as we move through the cycle. In addition, there are projects that, we might have anticipated previously starting in 2025, looking at our CIP that we did last year, the year before last, which we're going to be redoing again. So that will also change this scenario. So what you're looking at today is really just kind of a scenario run, of the model that, kind of anticipated, as Isla is mentioning, is kind of just anticipating, some of the things that we have already said we might be doing, or we could be doing, or, when are we acquiring debt, talking with, Troy and his crew is, we might be acquiring that earlier, given some of the expenditures that we have. Some of the project dollars, may be changing, and again, we might not be doing some of them. Like, for example, the model, kind of assumes we're working on a water main extension program. We're not ready to start that. We were, I think, a little bit more ambitious in 2022, 2023 when we were putting the CFP together, that we would have, some staff capacity and some ability to start taking that project on. We're not there yet, but it's still on our books. It's still a project we want to undertake, and so we start looking at this analysis, this financial analysis, what makes sense, when can we start some things, and this will be, what the tool that we'll be using, annually. Every year we'll be looking at this tool, what decisions, are going to go into, which projects we can undertake, what does it look like for the health of the utility as we move forward through time. And that's one of the things I really love about this. It gives us that tool, that we can make some informed decisions, as we come to project conversations around projects, conversations with the council, as we look at potentially new customers coming online, what kind of revenue, we'll be receiving from that. So, and again, and also the assumptions on growth. Are we talking about 1%, or is it 1.5%, or 3%? On inflationary side, for costs on operations. So again, this is a tool. This is a forecast. All those concepts go into making this. And gosh, Isla, what we did, like 7 different data updates over the course of these last 2 years to make sure that we were at least talking in current terms, because things change as we go on, and that was one of the things I think Carollo was really trying to be responsive with us on, was, okay, so your situation today is different than it was in late 2023. Let's update those numbers. Okay, halfway through 2024, your situation is different today because we acquired some water rights. And we actually saw that expenditure go through. So we have different real data that we wanted to make sure that we were plugging in to be able to utilize, to give us some sense of the picture moving forward. And so that's what we're really trying to capture, just showing you the functionality of kind of how this works. Go ahead.
All right. Thanks, Dan. I just like to look at it from the Joe public and the Jan public. Is like, why is my water bill always increasing and not decreasing? So just having a user-friendly way for them to see, okay, this is why. So
Right.
Thank you.
And every year, as I think Isla was just kind of noting, where we see this kind of static increase annually, that really addresses the fact that our costs go up every year, whether it's administrative costs, insurance, fuel, or operational costs, whether it's fuel, cost of equipment, cost of personnel, salaries, every year go up. City expenses go up. So we have to, every year at least, have a base increase. 2 to 3% is, really kind of the minimum. And then when you look at anything beyond 2 to 3%, like here we're at 5%. Now we're actually addressing the ongoing, new projects that are coming on, to be able to, accomplish that and keep our system, functioning and healthy and I guess, kind of current, with
All
new
right.
technologies and treatment needs.
All right, thanks, Dan.
Dan, I had some questions about the way the graph is, the dialog box, the photo is covering the orange, the piece that I can see. The orange reflects what then, as far as the numbers go?
The rate funded capital.
Okay.
So you
And
have,
then,
oh, go ahead.
go ahead.
Oh, no, I was gonna say, so you have capital that's funded from cash, or we call it rate funded capital. And then you have capital that'll be funded by debt, which then that gray box starts going up because you're,
So, and there's like we have one blue box, but it looks like, is that a combination then, reflect the combination of operating and non-operating expenses? Is that what the blue represents?
oh, yes.
And then the green line is, again, so the line reflects the addition, it's the expenditures and then total revenues after increase, because I'm just trying to follow.
Oh, I see
That's-
what you're saying. So
Yeah.
if there were any policy transfers, which there's not in this one, then it would be
Okay.
a green box, but it's
Okay.
zero.
Okay.
So I actually, if that's something that will never happen, we could take that off the graph before we turn it the model over to the city.
So it looks like the one that's really being reflected, then it's hard to cut this early in the morning trying to figure out the difference in the blues. So the blue that we're looking at reflects non-operating expenses. Is that currently what's on the
Or
graph?
operating expenses.
Oh, it's operating, not? Okay.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, so I can't tell the difference between the blues so yeah, okay. I just needed some clarification
Okay.
there. Okay,
Oh,
thank you.
no problem. But good point. We can change some of those colors around. So point noted. So this is the financial forecast. And then I wanted to just show you kind of how I was saying, like if you look at years 28 through 2030, how it's like a buildup of reserves. If we go to this next graph, you will see you have the orange bar is now the operating fund balance at the end of the year. And then the blue bars are that debt service reserve. Remember I was saying, if you issue debt, then you have to have a debt service reserve of 1 year that you hold back. And that's pretty standard when issuing debt. And then you have that green line, which is the target reserves we talked about in those assumptions. So that 20%. And so you'll see that there are some years where the orange line is like just meeting so in 2027, that big increase, the increase is just enough to get us to the line, right? No more, no less. And then the 5%, we start building back up our operating fund reserve again. So then you'll start seeing like, okay, we're really building up some cash because that orange bar is a lot larger than that green line. But then we start eating away at it again. So it's like we're just trying to plan ahead so that we're not having big spikes in rates. So it's like, okay, we're building up our cash, but we know we have some expenditures down the road that we're going to use this cash for. And then we start drawing that cash back down. And so that is what this graph represents. Okay. And then next we looked at affordability. And we looked at affordability of your approved 2025 rate. So we look at this through a couple of different metrics. So you have the median household income, which is what we've used for years and years. And that is really looking at the median household income and then seeing what your utility bill is as a percentage of the median household income. And so EPA has guidelines where it's 4.5% for water and wastewater. I think 2.5% for wastewater alone, 2% for water. And so we use that as a threshold. We also look at the household burden indicator, because median is like, that's a nice metric, but then what is your 20th percentile? So folks in that lowest 20th percentile, what is that income? And then what is the percentage where you know, a water bill starts to become a burden? And then we look at living wage. So we look at the living wage, and we did that for the Olympia Lacey Tumwater area. And this is developed by MIT. So they have a calculator that has household living expenses and what is a living wage for your area. We also look at the ALICE method, which stands for asset limited, income constrained, and employed. So this is by county, not by city. So for Thurston County, it's about $74,000. And so then we look at the percentage of the bill compared to that, to $74,000 annually. Then we look at the federal poverty level, and we looked at a 4-person household, and then just compared the bill to that. And Tumwater, you have a program, an incentive program for low income, senior, disabled. So you do have a program in place to offer some assistance to those customers. Then we also looked at hours at minimum wage. So your minimum wage is $16.66. So how many hours must a customer work that is making minimum wage? How many hours do they need to work to pay their utility bill? So those are all of the different metrics. Like I said, we just wanted to have different points because I think that the median is just, it's one point and that's not everyone's situation. Okay, so what you'll see here is we looked at 2 things. So we looked at a water only bill, and then we looked at water, sewer, and stormwater, because we understand that your customers are not just getting a water bill by itself, that they're having to pay for these other services. And so looking at that with the ALICE method, for water only, that bill is 0.7%, so not quite 1%. And then for the water, sewer, and stormwater bill, it's at 2.1%. So still considered affordable under that methodology. Under the median household income, we looked at water only, and then every all utilities to 1.6%. So also affordable under that median household metric. And then we looked at the living wage metric. So about $2,900 to $5,800 a month. And then looking at that under water only, affordable, under water, sewer, stormwater, now you start getting to where it would become maybe moderately, depending on what your income is, start becoming a strain. And then the federal poverty level, we have the water bill at 1.5% of that. And then for your total utility bill at 4.8% of that. So again, when you start looking at those lower income folks, the total utility bill starts to have a heavier burden. And then looking at hours of minimum wage. So a person making minimum wage would have to work 2.4 hours to pay their water only bill and would have to work 7.7 or almost 8 hours to pay their total utility bill. And so again, these are, I would say overall, if there's something to take from this, is that overall your utility bill is affordable, but to keep in mind with those that are at that federal poverty level, it is going to create more of a strain when looking at, especially looking at the total water bill. So it's just something to keep in mind. And I think that later there's a presentation on the you know, Lifeline project or Lifeline program, I should say. And so the fact that the utility is trying to put things in place or expand that program, I should say, is a good thing, because it's affordable to most, but there's always someone where it may be a burden. Eileen.
Do we have numbers then on, as far as dialing into our data, the number of residents that are in that the federal poverty level? Did we go that far? Or is that going to be presented in the next presentation? If our staff has those numbers.
Yeah, I would say we didn't necessarily go to that level of resolution, but like that would be something that, you know, Troy and the finance team and us would work together to kind of figure out, you know, how do we lessen that burden at, you know, at some of those levels. But this gives us kind of the targets, you know, so that we can start identifying, you know, the folks within our community that might need that assistance and tailor that program specifically to help, you know, reduce that burden, as I mentioned.
Okay.
So we don't have specific numbers, but this gives us kind of the target to look at for those folks within our community.
Okay.
And so we took a look at that, and then again, these will also be in the model so that how is it impacting the affordability, looking at these 5 different metrics. Okay, and then lastly, we wanted to talk about the water impact fee. So what's an impact fee? It's a one-time charge that is imposed on new or upsized meter connections. And this is to compensate for the cost of providing capacity into the system. And so this is not a continuous fee like a rate. And since it's not, we have a special calculation for it so that you're not double charging for rates and impact fees. And so an impact fee is assessed by a per unit of capacity. So in Tumwater's rate, it would be a per ERU or equivalent residential unit. So we have this saying, growth pays for growth, and that really is just a very simple explanation of why we have a water impact fee. Growth should pay for growth. So we have 3 impact fee methodologies that we typically use. A manual's coming out soon from AWWA that I'm helping to co-author, but we're looking at 3 basic methodologies. We're looking at the system buy-in. This is for systems or areas that are near build out. So you're not going to have a lot of growth, but you have available capacity in your existing system. So you would use this approach to say, okay, we have this system, you want to buy into it. This is what it will cost you. Then we have the incremental approach. And this is for utilities that are experiencing a lot of growth and a lot of expansion. And they don't have much capacity in their existing system. They have to go out and build more capacity for these new customers. You would use then the incremental cost approach. And then we have a hybrid approach that combines the two. So you have a lot of growth, but you do have some availability in your existing system. And so we would use a hybrid approach. In Tumwater's instance, we use the incremental cost approach, saying, okay, we're not looking at existing assets. We are looking just at the future projects that are going to add capacity to the system, or that that's being built because of growth. So if it's being built to just serve your existing customers, we did not include it in the calculation. This is just for those projects that are that have to be built and sought out because of your growth. So we did our impact fee calculation. So we have future system improvements of about $57 million that we included in our calculation. So those projects are water rights acquisition and the brewery well field. And we looked at how much capacity is this adding? And so the added capacity is close to 10,000 ERUs that could be served with this new these new projects. And so in simple terms, we take the cost, we divide it by the unit of capacity so that we could get a unit rate or a unit fee that we then can charge per unit to new development. And so if we look down at step 3, you will see that the calculated impact fee is $5,749. The existing fee is $5,511. So that, and I believe that was changed not that long ago. So your existing fee is actually, it's appropriate and it's pretty close to what we calculated. We calculated a little bit more, but your existing fee is really like right in line with what you should be charging for that impact fee. Like I said, we calculated a little bit more. That's that was looking at the impact fee. So you're right in line with where you should be. You could even charge a little bit more if you wanted.
Yeah, just to kind of on that note, historically, you know, our connection fees, you know, impact fees, or also our connection fees, you know, were much lower than they are today, and you know, we had been increasing them at a kind of an inflationary rate of 2% generally every year, and you know, as we were putting again that last CFP 2024 to 2029, we recognized that a lot of the projects, a lot of the expensive projects we had were really relative to growth, and so. You know, I told Isola this is very validating to see that our numbers got to kind of in line where they needed to be, because, you know, we just, you know, we took almost, you know, kind of an educated, you know, kind of guess at where we needed to be in terms of escalating the increases. And we went from a 2% increase rate to an 8% or 8.5% increase this year, looking forward to these major projects that are coming on. And that is what really kind of helped bring our connection fees into line for existing today. So they were lower in previous years, but again, this growth that we're looking at is really, you know, with that mantra of growth paying for growth, we really need to take a closer look at that. And I really credit this committee for, as we were going through that project or process in 2029, and even prior to that, when we adopted our last water system plan, to kind of really ask the question, you know, is our connection fees commensurate with what our community needs. And so we took a closer look at that, and this is where we arrived. So, so yeah, I just wanted to kind of just make that comment.
Yeah, um, I was pretty pleased with that because then I didn't have to say, hey, your fee's too high, or you need to double your fee, because that also doesn't necessarily always go over well. So this was, yeah, like I said, I was pleased because you're on the right track and you're pretty much right there. Okay, so path moving forward. So we have, we talked about the utilities goals and things that, they're looking to implement in the future, near future, or maybe in a few years. So we have enhancing the Lifeline program. So expanding that program to include more customers. And I think you'll hear a presentation about that this morning. So fund the CFP. So use those impact fees and increased rate revenue to fund capital projects. That is really the main driver of this financial plan is that capital, that needed capital, and considering possible debt funding as a tool to help with that, to help leverage your cash and help mitigate some bigger rate increases in the future. Something that was talked about, we didn't do it this cycle, but looking at perhaps adjusting the rate structure. So looking at maybe small and large commercial, we discussed a few things, but just looking at possibly adjusting the rate structure as your customer base and your customer characteristics change. And then update the analysis. So my recommendation is always update your financial plan annually, whether you're doing it internally or you're getting a consultant to do it, whatever it is. Most of the time finance is looking at this stuff more than one time a year, but really annually you should be updating your financial plan. And then impact fee, you should look at every 3 to 5 years. So that is something that I wouldn't necessarily recommend taking the time and going through that whole calculation every single year. But if something substantial changes, take a look at it. If nothing substantial changes, take a look at it every 3 to 5 years. And that should be sufficient. I would say no more than 5 years. Because even as we saw in just these last, 2 years, things have just changed, and the capital program's just so fluid, and your needs change, that you don't want to go too long without looking for that or looking at that. And that's all I have. So thank you so much for listening to this presentation. And do you have any other questions for me?
Dan, so this is in our comprehensive plan, right?
Okay, my system is running low on resources. We do an analysis in our comp plan, yes, and we do that every 10 years, and so we're going to actually be starting the next update of our water system comprehensive plan. I think 2028 is on the kind of the current program right now, because I think the last one was adopted 21, and they take 2.5 years, and we want to have this in place before 2031, the next plan update. So yes, we do a financial analysis as part of that. This model will help inform that. As well. So this will be a working tool for us, for a significant period of time to come, hopefully.
Excellent, thank you.
I think, Dan, that I think she was asking, is it part of the comp plan that we're reviewing right now that is due, that we're working on?
This level of utility specific information, I don't believe is part of the city's comp plan, but the comp plan adopts, if you will, the water utility comp plan, the sewer utility, kind of comprehensive plan as part of, and so it integrates, the goals and the structures of these other plans, but they are completed separately.
Okay. It's a lot of data. I love data, but it's a lot of data. And trying to figure out, okay, so it sounds like we're okay. So we're on track. If we're gonna have a takeaway here, that it sounds like we're on
Yeah.
track.
Yeah, I would, yeah, that's the takeaway, but
Mhm.
also the takeaway is there are some capital needs,
Mhm.
and with those capital needs, depending on the timing, there will need to be increases in rates because your exist
Right. And and
Councilmember, are you trying
Yeah.
to, oh, are
Yes.
you
Yes.
freezing? Okay.
Yeah, and Aisha, what you just said last, the slides could be a little more user friendly.
okay.
Just
Mhm.
bottom line up front, what you just said, if you can just put that on a slide, so Joe Public and Jan Public can just be like, okay, I get this. So
Okay.
just my thoughts. They're
Mhm.
they're
mean,
heavy, so break it down where we can
that-
digest it better.
Sorry, Councilmember, didn't
Thank
interrupt,
you.
but that would be what we do as we
Yeah.
come forward during the kind of the budget conversations, the
Yeah.
capital facility plan adoption. We would be presenting that information, to kind of demonstrate the trajectory of the utility, what the projects are increasing, and where the costs are going. And so, yeah, we would try and break that information down fairly simply for folks. This is really, again, just kind of showing you kind of outputs of what this model can do and how it forecasts for us, and how we can kind of consider what those future rate needs are.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Great.
And Dan, will this come to council at some point? What's the plan for this information to be shared with council, or what? That is as far as like path forward. What's the next steps for sharing this data? What's your plan?
Well, I mean, we can certainly bring this forward as part of just an overall conversation to kind of show where this project has gone. But the project is we don't really need any council acceptance. Project is complete. After this briefing, we want to just kind of share the kind of the results that we found, where we're at. And again, the results of this project will be seen in future iterations of our rate increase conversations and our capital facility conversations. And so council will see this tool. Like I said, I'm happy to do a conversation with council down the road. We can even update this model or kind of reflect current situations again, depending on how far down the road that is. But yeah, the intention really was just for today to because this is a project that kind of originated with Public Works Committee. We wanted to kind of close the door, show the results. Yeah, as Isla noted, we are in decent shape today. It doesn't mean that we can't, we got to stop being diligent or vigilant to what the future needs are. But this is the tool that's going to help us look at those future needs.
Okay. Excellent.
Because I was wondering too, when we were planning, we are going through the whole, like when we did the utility increase, if this would have helped the council at that time, or does it just not have anything, this report have anything to do with the increase that we did for the budget we just approved?
Yeah, this report this work had a lot to do with that. As we were going through this process, as I mentioned, Corolla came back with a significant increase just to keep ahead of the projects that we've got. And so we've, because of that, we've kind of scaled back the scope of some of the projects we had on the books previously or were intending to start earlier. We pushed some of those a little bit farther out. We lowered that rate increase to kind of really kind of forecast, what we needed to keep that line somewhat level moving forward without, shocking our customers in a significant way. So the next time you'll probably see the results of this will really be as we kind of start talking about our capital program later this year, September, October, this year, when we bring those results back and we look at that 6-year forecast that we generally include on those sheets. That was also what helped inform our impact fee or connection fee increase through that analysis. So you'll see the results of this again later this year, and I'm happy to kind of give a broader conversation when we move forward.
Yes, I will appreciate that.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things that that we forget, that each year we have an incremental, we do have an increment bump in all of our rates. And then I think the one that was the bigger one was the one that was a little bit more difficult to explain. Well, we've already taken that leap, so that one's already, that's there. So, but just to keep it keep in mind, just to refresh our council members, that, you know, each year there is a plan. You've got in your plan for the CFP that there's always an increase each year. So it's not a surprise.
You know, and again, another piece of that puzzle is
To
that affordability.
council and the public. Yeah.
And another piece of that is that affordability piece, where traditionally we really just looked at the median household income, and you know where 2% for the water utility is like, if we met that metric, we were like, we're affordable. You know, but as you know, Isola's presentation showed, not always the case. You know, there's other metrics that we need to consider. And so, you know, moving forward, we now have a different tool to help us identify that. And you know, Troy's going to be up next talking about what our programs look like and what does expansion look like as well. I think he's going to be talking about expansion, but if we do expand, that's where this tool comes back into place. And, you know, what kind of rate structures do we need to make sure that we're implementing? Because, you know, we can't allow our revenues to drop below our operating expenses. And so we're going to have to make up differences somewhere along the line, but we also don't want to increase the rates to a point where, you know, it's affecting our residential population. So, you know, there are considerations for us looking at the small and large retail or you know, commercial brackets. Where do we recover, you know, those programs so that we can support our community as a whole? You know, and really just kind of, that's where we can dig into those pieces. That's where we really haven't had that piece of that tool or of this tools in previous years.
So you have the ability to run the model. As we're looking at the ones that are really will feel are the ones that are at the federal poverty level in our community, and we don't know how many families this exists or that this would impact. At this point, we don't have that kind of data.
The data is available. We just didn't, you know, do that level of analysis for this presentation. That will be something that Troy and I will be looking at as we move forward to determine, you know, how, what does the program need to expand to? You know, does that expansion drop those rates? So if you look at our Lifeline program, and I don't want to steal Troy's thunder, but like that cuts the utility rates by 50%. So if you're cutting that rate by 50% for X amount of households, you know, what revenue requirement does the utility need to look at? But does that elevate then those folks that are living the poverty level? Does that give them, you know, sufficient means to be able to afford the utilities, you know, that we have?
Right.
That's that piece there.
And I did look at the when I was looking at the census data and things like that. I think for Tumwater, 7.8% of persons are at that federal poverty level, but I don't know how that translates into households. It just said persons, so households it could be a less percent. Not sure.
And what I would also say, Councilmember Swarthout, is you know, we have pretty good access to all of the census data, and you know, TRPC has a lot of data available. I think we have, Alyssa's been working on some data from the census that will help us identify areas of the community that might be lower income from looking at it from an equity lens. I think the challenge is there's households and there's ratepayers, and they aren't necessarily commensurate. So, you know, in a rental situation, for example, you might have somebody who's paying rent that includes their water, sewer, and garbage. And so we can do the best we can to try and figure out where there are potential targets for people who need some assistance. But other than having the macro data that that's been reviewed today, I don't know that we can get too much farther down in terms of detail. But Troy is going to talk about a process by which our finance staff has actually taken the lead in looking for opportunities to identify folks who could potentially benefit from the Lifeline program. So,
yeah, I remember that. Well, good. All right. This was a lot of data. Okay, go ahead, Dan.
That's probably a really good segue into Troy's presentation. Unless there's any other questions for Isola or myself or Patrick.
All right. Well, thank you. Any other questions, Councilmember? I think we're good. It's a lot to process at 8 o'clock in the morning. Thanks, you guys. It would have been nice to have been able to read this ahead of time. I'm like, my brain has got all these questions. So thank you. So thank you for all the
I'm
data. I
available
appreciate
anytime
that.
questions come up for you. And Isola's on the East Coast, so she had a little bit more time to kind of like wake up this morning to be able
Yeah.
to present.
Oh, okay.
So,
I
thanks,
didn't get home
Isola.
until
Appreciate
midnight
it.
last night. I'm just saying. So,
Well,
all
thank you
right.
all, and I'm
Thank you.
available. Dan can reach me for any other questions that come up once you've had time to process it. Okay, thank
Well,
you.
super. All right. Thank you so much.
Bye.
And as Dan said with that segue, we will jump into our next presentation on the Utility Assistant Program update, and take it away, Troy.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. So this is specifically about our Lifeline program, and that's the one where low-income seniors and disabled residents can get 50% off of their utilities, their entire utility bill, 50% off. So it's a great program. And so as you know, when we were working on the budget and the rate increases and everything, we had discussions at council about finding out. We felt for a long time that the program was underutilized, and we've tried various methods of communication the last few years, but it didn't seem to move the needle a lot. And so we've been working on it. Excuse me. Someone's trying to call me, and my phones weren't silenced there. So we've done some work around that. Have a little bit of updated information first. I think when we presented this for the budget, I believe I reported there were 110 people on the Lifeline program currently. That was actually incorrect. We actually had 190. We went back and looked at that again. So maybe we have moved the needle more than we thought. Because I didn't get that 110 number from nowhere, but maybe it was like 2 or 3 years ago. So it looks like it's helped a little bit, but we've done some more research and analysis. And specifically, we were able to get data from Thurston County to look at how many people, because there's a similar program for property tax, where the similar program where low-income, senior, and disabled folks can get 50% off their property taxes from the county. And so one of our big criteria, if someone wants to apply for this program, the first thing we do is look at the county, because if the county's already verified their income, that just makes it easy for us, and we just put them on the program. And then we check them each year to make sure they're still in that situation. And so by using that data from the county and comparing it to what we already have, we've identified an additional 294 people who may qualify, households that may qualify for this program. And so we're really excited to find that out. And I shared that news with Lisa and Dan, and then Dan very wisely pointed out that, well, how much does that equal to? And so just using the average utility bill of $143 and times that number of people, that works out to about $252,000 a year. So more than $500,000 in a biennium. And so, going back to the previous presentation, that does put, if all of those people did indeed qualify and signed up, that's a great thing for our community. It also puts a big dent in our revenue that needs to be made up through the rates.
So I have a question, Troy. So
Yes.
what was the increase percentage? Was it a 80%, 70% increase from what we previously had 3 years ago? Because that's a number that we should be bragging about and proud about.
It is. I didn't figure the percentage. I
Mhm.
could real quick, actually. About an 80% increase.
Excellent. Yeah, let's highlight that, because I know our council members, especially Leetta and Councilmember Kathy, we're going to be happy to hear that number. So that's good. Thank you.
Yeah, and so what we'd like to do from here, my memory and I was going to say assumption, but not really an assumption. I think it was kind of guidance from council to try to reach out and try to expand this program. This doesn't necessitate the need for us to create a new program. It's the program we already have. And we can send correspondence to the folks that we've identified
Mhm.
and give them the opportunity to apply. And we wanted to bring that here, and this worked out great with the previous presentation as we're talking about the revenue piece of things and future rates. And so, the reality is this $250,000 a year does need to get made up for
Mhm.
in the general rates. And so,
Okay.
you know,
Okay.
so-
So these individuals have been identified by looking at the county data. So now we just need to reach out to them to let them know, hey, this is a program that we have and you can apply for it. So it's just a matter of how do we let them know about this, right? Is that the next step?
Yep, and we've actually got a plan. We've drafted a letter that we can mail to each household, informing them of this possibility and getting instructions on how to contact us to apply.
Right. So the letter and the media, maybe an article in our local newspaper or online to just all out campaign to let them know, hey, go ahead and apply for this, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and so with the new model that Dan and his team will be using, this is something that we can get going on this now, and then this is something that he can factor in using this rate model to see how much we need to adjust the rates for the next year to make up that gap.
okay. So let's get. So now we have to make up that gap. So does that mean that I read that the Thurston County Sheriff are going to have a new building, right, coming to Tumwater? So does that mean that the impact fee for that might go up to adjust these costs, or how are we going to do this?
So no, that building is actually it's an existing building. I think it's the state parks agency currently that's currently their building. And so it's no new construction. There'll just be some remodels. So there won't be any impact fees or connection.
Okay. All right.
So Troy, to go back to the numbers, I know we saw that, heard this at the Budget and Finance Committee. So we currently have 190 people on the program. And so through the analysis that your staff did, we could potentially add almost like another 300 people to the program, totaling. So then we're looking at about almost 500 people in. Is that how the math would work out?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, all right.
So that's basically my presentation at this point. I didn't make a PowerPoint or anything like that. Just wanted to share the information with you and with.
So Troy.
Yes.
When are we going to find out the total number that has applied for this program, or an update basically?
Probably we'll get going on. Did you want to add something before I answer?
Nope, go ahead and then I'll jump in.
Okay. This is something we can get going on almost right away. We're pretty well prepared, and so probably over the next month, 2 months, it just depends on how quickly people respond. I would kind of expect some response really quickly, but then I would also just kind of assume that some of it will kind of trickle in over a period of time too.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that you will likely get regular updates around this program, because this is just one additional way that Troy's staff very astutely helped us identify. The limitation here is what we've identified are people who own property and pay property tax in Thurston County. And so that's limited to people who, you know, are homeowners. But we absolutely will make sure that we are able to identify those. I'd have to talk with Troy a little bit further to figure out, you know, in the case of, for example, mobile home parks, the mobile home park itself, the land is owned by an entity, but each of the units could potentially be owned and taxed as personal property, I believe. Depending on if the manufactured home is pit set and attached permanently to the ground or not. So we may be actually covering and capturing some of those, you know, senior citizens and others who own their manufactured home in those mobile home parks. We could be, they could be a component of this. But, you know, our commitment to the council when we talked about this during the budget process was to ensure that we are doing everything we can to address the needs of our lower income folks who find utility rates and increases in utility rates to be challenging. So this is just one step, and I'm really pleased with Troy's staff. When he came to us with that, it was awesome. And we're constantly looking for ways to do that. But then again, you know, also needing to find a way to make up that reduction in revenue. So the Corolla tool is going to be really helpful in the future for us to be able to plug in these different data points and scenarios to help us figure out how best to accomplish all these various and competing priorities and goals.
I was wondering too, if as part of the budget and finance presentation, we also heard about the credit card fees. And so Councilmember Jefferson hasn't heard that piece of it. If we can address, it's ironic, Councilmember, that this program costs $252,000, but we pay $250,000 in credit card fees. And so there's an opportunity there to educate our public on helping save money. I just changed mine over to my checking account. So I just want to let you know that after our presentation, I had no idea. And I think if more people knew that you know, that you can help just by a simple change and it's just an easy fix that you can save the city hundreds of thousands of dollars that we can apply to help others, you know. And so I'm hoping that we're still working on that messaging. I wasn't sure where we were with that program. So.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Troy. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Go
No, you go.
Okay. I was just going to say, Councilmember, we can continue to put the message out. The evaluation we are embarking on right now is whether or not to pass through those credit card fees to those who utilize. So it's sort of a two-pronged approach, right? Letting people know that use your credit card. If you choose to use your one electronic method of payment in the credit card, right now we're paying those fees. To the tune of about $250,000 over the course of a year. If you'd like to help out others, use your e-check option, or come into the office. We'd love to have a conversation with you over, cash or check.
Excellent.
But then we are still likely moving forward with and making sure that we're messaging it well in advance and very clearly. But we are likely going to pass through those credit card fees, not just for utilities, but for anything else where we're collecting. It's really a convenience fee, right?
Excellent.
Right. And I appreciate that part of the presentation that there were people that have been asking for this. So I appreciate it.
And one last point, as the term DEI has been demonized and is a negative today, we promise to look at things from a DEI lens in Tumwater. So I'm so proud of you, Troy, and for your team, because this is that equity lens that we're looking at, that inclusion lens for those with limited income. So this is a positive for the DEI. I just wanted to make that note. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll definitely pass that on to my team. And yeah, and I agree. And that was one of the discussions we've had at the staff level too, with DEI is, by passing on these credit card fees and offering no charge ways to pay your bill electronically also. That's really more equitable across the city.
Mhm. Appreciate that. Well, good. This is a lot of data this morning, you guys. So for an 8 o'clock meeting. So thanks so much. But I do appreciate the information that was shared in the Lifelong program. Yeah, it speaks to our community and how you really don't realize how many families are out there. So let's see. All right. It looks like we have come to the end of our agenda. Do we have any other additional items, anyone? No? Thank goodness we didn't have any snow. So far so good. Keeping our fingers crossed. So we don't have to put our snow plows out there this year. All right. Well, with that, then I will call the Thursday, February 6, 2025 Tumwaters Public Works Committee adjourned. Thanks, everyone. Stay warm.